All right, guys, welcome to day, first day of lecture, but day, I guess, two of our e-learning. Let's go ahead and pray real quick, and we'll get started on the notes. You guys do need to take these notes, take detailed notes in your notebook. If you don't have your notebook, obviously start a new one. I will be giving a notes quiz probably here soon, so make sure that you guys are copying these down. If you need to pause this video, I'm not going to go nearly as slow as I do in class. So if you need to pause this video to get other information, feel free to do so. You have that ability here, which is kind of nice. But again, I will be going quicker, so just kind of be aware of that. I'm going to do everything kind of the way that we were doing it. Things are not going to change too much. So like we have a video here. I'm going to play that video. So it's weird. You're going to watch it through another screen on a screen through another screen, which is interesting. But you guys will be all right. So.
Ascension Island, an isolated volcanic island surrounded by the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. During the night, tiny green turtles have hatched in the sand. These are the first steps of a 1,400-mile-long journey to feeding grounds off South America. The youngsters have no parents to show them the way. Their mothers laid their eggs on this beach many weeks ago and left them to hatch on their own. Frigate birds now patrol the beaches in search of the hatchlings. The vulnerable little turtles instinctively dash for the safety of the sea. At first, they must get past the crashing waves. It's a dangerous time and they could drown. Once through the surf, they'll swim frantically for several days until they reach deeper water, where they'll disappear into the open ocean for months. And decades later, the females will travel more than 1,000 miles back to Ascension Island to lay their eggs on the very same beach where they started life. By using the Earth's magnetic field to guide them, they're able to navigate their way across the vastness of the ocean. Not many will make it, but those that do may live for 80 years, and they make their immense journeys entirely on their own.
Okay, so why do I show you that clip about turtles? Not just because turtles are cute, though they are, but more because of Darwin's key idea, and that is that idea of survival of the fittest. You guys have heard it in that way. But really what it is this natural selection. Again, remember, Darwin started his life off working with pigeons where he selectively bred for certain attributes, certain features. That was called artificial selection. Here he's talking about nature having a selection of certain attributes and features. This idea of natural selection, I have it down there at the bottom, is the engine of evolution, and that's really key to understanding why Darwin's theory was just so heavily praised and still is to this day. I don't know why it keeps doing that. So we're going to summarize that theory into 4 steps, and one of those steps you guys just saw. But over time, the number of individuals that carry advantageous traits will increase in a population. So what does that mean? That means that if you get a trait that is beneficial to the species and enhances or increases survival, that means that that trait will thus be passed on to another generation. Okay? The reason birds have the ability to fly is because at one point, some bird had the ability to go from gliding to actually flying, and that was obviously a benefit to it. It enabled it to survive more effectively, which means it had leisure time to reproduce more. It was a more attractive mate choice for female birds or for male birds, whatever it might have been. And thus, that particular character became dominant within the species. So you can summarize Darwin's theory again in 4 steps. This might be one of the most important slides that we're going to go over today. Okay? It's overproduction, variation, selection, and adaptation. Again, if you need to pause, this is a long slide. It's written small, but it's a long slide. If you need to pause, feel free to do so. And by the way, I don't remember if we actually prayed. I think I said we were going to, but I don't think we did. That's all right. If we did, we're going to pray again because we need it. If we didn't, we're going to go ahead and pray. So if you could stop for a moment. I think during this kind of crazy time, we need prayer a lot, right? So bow with me. Lord God, I just lift up this group. I thank you, Lord, for their patience and for their willingness to sit through this weird sort of presentation, this way of doing things that we're not used to. But Lord, in the same breath, we look at our screens all day long, so we're kind of used to it. And I just ask, Lord, that as we make this transition to a different type of learning that might go into the 30th, it might go longer, who knows? Lord, I just pray that you help us to make that adjustment, that you help us to still learn, that you help us to try and understand all of this material despite the fact that we're not here learning together. Lord, be with us. Be with those that are sick. Lord, may they feel comfort. May they get better. Be with those that aren't sick. May you protect us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, so the first thing, the reason I show you that turtle video is because it's my favorite example of overproduction. Okay? Most turtles are going to lay somewhere between 50 to 100 eggs. I think the average for a leatherback turtle or a green turtle is like 105 eggs per clutch. And listen, that female will do that more than once in a particular season. Why is a turtle laying 105 eggs? I mean, honestly, think about that question. It's weird because I can't have you guys answer it, but maybe you guys can put it in the comments below or something along those lines. A turtle's laying 105 eggs because there's not going to be 105 survivors. Okay, it's a really sad truth. Only 1%. Okay, I've seen as much as one, or little as one, as much as 3%. But usually you get the 1% statistic. 1% of those turtles are going to survive. So out of those 100 eggs, how many of those eggs are going to survive into a mature adult turtle? Anybody do that math real quick? It's one turtle. Okay, so you guys can understand why they're laying so many eggs per clutch. It's because they are trying to get at least one of them to survive to adulthood so that they can replace themselves when they die, so that the species maintains the population that it's currently at. And again, some species of turtle will lay more than one clutch per season to again offset that and enable more to survive. Okay, so overproduction is key. We even see that in the world with us. Okay, our population is constantly expanding. When I was in college, I've told you guys this before, there were 6 billion people, 6.5 billion people on the earth. Now there's 8.5. And I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but no, I'm not that old. Okay, in one generation, we've increased by billions of people. So overproduction is a thing, even with us. The next thing is definitely variation. This is particularly from your genetics, your DNA. Your DNA is different from the person's next to you. Again, the majority of it is the same, but there's a slight difference. That variation is key. Right now, there's probably a small percentage of the population that is immune to the coronavirus. 100% immune. Okay? And that's a good thing. Okay? Because if this was some sort of really bad pandemic, which I don't believe it is, but if it was, and this had a much higher mortality rate, those people would survive and carry on our species. I feel like this is a horrible example for right now, but you guys get what I'm saying. It's not, by the way, it's not the case. It's not that big of a deal. more people have been killed so far this year from the flu than this virus, so don't worry about it. But hopefully there are some people that are naturally immune. They have a slight genetic variation within themselves that makes them immune to this particular strand of virus. The next thing, of course, is selection, and this is what Darwin again prides himself on. This is what Darwin is most famous for. Certain traits can make individuals more or less likely to survive and thus have offspring. If you want to survive, if you want to have offspring, if that's one of the purposes of an individual organism's life, an individual's life, and they're not like us, okay? Deer, snakes, whatever wild animal you want, whatever wild animal you guys drew yesterday, it's not like us. They want to reproduce. That is a key factor in their psyche, in their biology. Most of us want to reproduce as well. There are some people that don't have that inclination, and that's perfectly fine. We are of such an evolved species that we don't have to necessarily do that. And trust me, there's still plenty of people willing to do that. So our population is not downtrodden because of that. But usually, reproduction is a natural biological drive in most organisms. Because of that, if you want to reproduce, you have to be able to survive. So if there's a trait that enables you to better survive, then you're going to be more likely and better suited to reproduce. Okay, so these kind of go hand in hand. And then finally, adaptation. Over time, those traits that improve the chances of survival and reproduction become more common within the species. Okay, so again, if a trait is beneficial and thus it is sought after by mates, that organism that has that beneficial trait will reproduce more, passing on that beneficial trait to successive generations. Okay? It should all make sense. All right, so Darwin's theory answers a really big question. Okay, and the question is this: why do living things have various forms yet seem to fit their environment? So, my favorite example of this, and we're going to talk about anteaters later as well, but anteaters, if you think of an anteater, hopefully you've all seen one, they have this really weird looking body structure, really weird looking body plan. So they usually have these big front claws that are kind of oddly shaped and curved. Then they have this really elongated snout, longer than most other organisms. They just look odd. And then they have this protruding tongue that can be literally 3 feet. It can protrude 3 feet past their mouth, which is already elongated. Okay, so really odd body plan. And yet, when you think about what an anteater consumes, obviously it's in the name, it eats ants. It needs those claws for digging into the ant colonies. It needs that long snout to burrow into the ant colonies where they live. It needs that long, sticky tongue to protrude out, to shoot out, and to gather as many ants as it can. Literally, it seems to fit perfectly with the niche that it has found. Okay, how does it do that? It does that through adaptation. Each species becomes adapted to its environment over time. And adaptation is an inherited trait that is present in a population because of the trait helps the individual or the individual survive and reproduce. Those odd-looking claws, that elongated face, that sticky, mucus-covered, elongated tongue, those are all things that help this weird-looking organism survive. And if it can survive better, again, it's going to be more likely to reproduce. So that's why you get such variety. You get so much variety in nature about the types of organisms we have because of the fact that they are all striving after a very particular niche, a very particular food source, a very particular way of mating, a very particular geographical area that has unique individual environmental pressures. All of that is used to drive evolution to create very unique organisms. And that's why, you can look at like a grizzly bear, and you can see kind of the variation in it and how it behaves and what it does. And then you literally, in the same family, you can look at a panda bear that doesn't look like it would ever harm a fly. And I don't know if I assume they're in the same family. But we have so much variation between these two groups. It's because one of them was evolved and adapted to feed off of, they're omnivores, so they feed off lots of things, but to be large predators. Okay, where the other one only eats bamboo. That's the only thing that it eats. It's very specialized. It has evolved to eat bamboo and kind of be docile and adore. I mean, if you've ever seen videos of pandas, like most zoo, I'm not saying that you should do this, but most zookeepers will come in and like walk around. They're not scared of a panda, okay? Because guess what? To them, to a panda bear, the zookeeper doesn't look tasty. It doesn't look like a big thing of bamboo, okay? So lots of variation caused by that adaptation. You guys watch this on Planet Earth, so I'm not going to watch it again. It's a really cool clip, though, so if you guys want to go back and watch it again, feel free to. But this was the cave salamander. Okay, and you guys can see, just in this image, you can see the translucent skin. You can see the really unique body plan. Very little muscle tone. There's not a lot of predators after this organism, so it doesn't have to move quickly. Okay, why does it have translucent skin? Because it doesn't have any need for pigment. There's no sunlight, so there's no need to protect itself from UV radiation. It has obviously those beautiful branching gills, which is so cool. It has that. Those gills come out, and blood vessels actually work their way through them to allow for oxygen to diffuse through, because it spends its entire life underwater. And then finally, the largest, and I don't have a picture of this one up, but the largest sort of interesting adaptation, which you wouldn't think of an adaptation, but it is. It lost its ability to see. Okay. Now, again, in most circumstances, that would be a disadvantage. Okay. And it would harm the organism's ability to survive. But if you have these big soft tissue organs right in front of your face that are easily damaged and can be hurt, and you don't have any light to allow them to actually see anything, what's the purpose of them? All they are doing is actually hindering the organism. So it's more evolutionarily beneficial for the organism to lose that adaptation rather than to keep it. So in that sense, the losing of your eyesight is actually more beneficial than the keeping of it. So, and that organism kind of shows that really well. All right. So how did Darwin come up with this idea, this revolutionary idea? I told you guys one of Darwin's beautiful attributes is that he used his life, literally his experiences, to figure out his great theory. So Darwin, for those that don't know, he spent 5 weeks. He went on the USS Beagle. He basically hopped a ship, and he spent 5 weeks in the Galapagos Islands. Okay, the Galapagos Islands are amazing in the fact that they, first off, are an island. Any island is going to have, especially one that is far enough from the mainland, is going to have species that are found usually only there. Okay, think about Madagascar, which is a really big island, but think about it. If you go there, it's dominated by lemurs. Most of those lemurs you only find in Madagascar. Okay, and the reason you only find them there is because it's so geographically isolated. The isolation increased the rate of evolution. And that's why it was so important for him to go to the Galapagos, because he saw an increase in evolution, and he saw organisms that were different because he was on an island. He took a special interest in birds. Remember, Darwin had this thing for breeding pigeons, so obviously birds were kind of a part of his life, and he liked them a lot. So he took a special interest in them. He sketched them. Again, he was a naturalist, just like you guys were the other day. He was a naturalist. He would go out and he would make notes, and he would sketch what he saw. And he didn't think at the time that he was looking at different species of birds. Okay, but eventually he went home, and I told you guys, he studied his notes. I mean, it's crazy. Most of you guys write something. I mean, I do this to a certain degree as well, where I'll write something and I'll kind of forget about it. He didn't do that. He went home and he actually went back over his work and thought about it and really contemplated it. So he took this special interest. He originally assumed that they were all the same species, but when he got back home, after looking back over his notes in London, he noticed that each species that he drew, he trusted his drawings. He noticed that each species looked slightly different. In his memoir, and I love this, he said the voyage of the Beagle, which he called the voyage of the Beagle, Darwin noted, almost as if in awe, one might really fancy that from the original paucity of birds in this archipelago, one species had been taken and modified from different ends, or for different ends. So what's happening here, he was looking back over his notes, and he made this idea, this this kind of awe-inspiring moment where he realized, look at the last line, it says one species had been taken and modified for different ends. What is the modification of species over time? That is in fact evolution. So this is him thinking through the process of understanding what evolution is before he ever wrote it down. So he came up with this thought. And again, this is derived from him, but I want you guys to get this down. It says, one original species migrated to the island from the mainlands of Central or South America. So one species flew over. Why would a species fly from the mainland to the island? I mean, I know that you guys can't answer that, but think about it for a second. It's because of food, probably. So they wanted an area of land that they weren't in competition for. So you fly over the island, you're not going to be in competition for the same food source that you probably were in competition with other birds for on the mainland. So they flew over. 13 species are believed to, and by the way, that's 14 now, that's changed. 14 species are believed to have evolved from a single ancestor that now reside, all 14 of those species reside on the Galapagos. Each species exploits a different niche. So just to remind you guys, we've talked about niches before, but to remind you what a niche is, or sometimes you'll hear me say niche, it's the role or function of an organism or species in an ecosystem. It's what they do to survive. It's their job. Okay? So most species will change to be better at their job. Okay? We do the same thing, I mean, to a certain degree. Okay? Cops, for example, they wear lots of equipment. Okay, they wear body cams and they wear armor and body armor, and they wear sometimes 2, maybe 3 guns. That's them being better prepared for their job. Okay, firefighters have a whole bunch of equipment. It's them being better prepared for their job. They are preparing themselves to do their job more effectively. It's the same thing in nature, except it just happens on a much slower rate. So these birds, give you guys just a moment here to get this down. Again, I know I'm going quick. Feel free to pause this video. I'm going to probably cut it off here soon, and we'll come back to it. And I know that I'm not going to go the 45 minutes. I could, but I'd rather you guys take your time and just like we would in class. I want you guys to be able to write through this. I feel like if I do this for 25, maybe 30 minutes, it'll take another 15 minutes to write it down, which would give us the 45-minute time period. So, and by the way, that's all we're going to do today. I'm going to post this. But all you guys have to do today is get these down, get these notes down. And again, for those of you saying, well, I don't need to write these down, it's recorded. Okay, why would I do that? Or if I just gave you that idea. Let me tell you, let me rest assured why you should go ahead and write this down in your notes. When you guys take a notes test, okay, here soon, I don't know when, but coming up, it's going to be a lot easier to go through your notes than it is to go through this whole lecture, right? Okay, so if you're sitting there thinking, oh, well, if he has a notes test, I can just go through the lecture and find all the information. You absolutely could. But, man, that's going to be tedious and annoying if you ask me, okay? You're going to have to go through, like I said, by the end of this, 25 minutes worth of stuff to find the answer to maybe 1 or 2 questions when you could just go through your notes. I think it's a lot quicker to turn a page than it is to listen to me ramble. You know what I'm saying? So, do what you want, but that would be my suggestion. And also that way you have the notes for when you study for the final, because yes, this stuff will be on the final. Okay? It's going to be a lot harder when you're studying for the final. I don't think you're going to be like, oh, well, let's go through his little 25-minute video. It'll still be up. You can do that if you want, but I wouldn't want to. All right. So again, the 14, I guess I changed it. The 14 species have evolved very different behaviors and different anatomy to accommodate their roles, on the island. Most notably are the changes in the beak. So these guys right here are actual, here's my face, are actual images from his notebook. So these are actual sketches that he made. Probably a little bit more detailed than some of the ones that I got yesterday, but hey, you guys are doing the best that you can. It's okay. I don't know why he didn't notice this at the time, but you can tell each one of these guys is different, obviously, than the next. So he later went back through and he realized that, okay, those are big enough differences between each one of these beaks primarily to result in a different species. So finch species have become adapted for different diets. That's why you have these different beak sizes and shapes. Some of those birds are going to suck on the nectar of flowers or maybe even blood of seagulls. You're going to want a beak shape that is almost like a hypodermic needle for that. So this guy down here is going to be much more inclined to have that kind of diet than, let's say, this guy right here. What do you think he's going to be doing? Okay, he's going to be eating things like seeds or maybe insects, larger prey. This guy right here and maybe this guy, I bet you this guy looks like shears. He's probably the leaf eater of the group. Okay, I don't know for certain. But obviously each one of these beaks is specifically designed for whatever task it has. All right, so we're going to stop here. I do have a lab. I might have you guys try to do it. But we're going to stop here for the day. Again, make sure that you get these notes down. If you guys have questions, let me know. If not, thanks for watching. Stay healthy. See you guys.